When you think of marriage in ancient India, what comes to mind? Probably a patriarchal system, right? Arranged unions, where fathers and families made the choice based on caste, status, and horoscopes. But what if I told you there was a time when ancient India did something radically different? A ceremony where the woman herself held all the power, where she, and she alone, made the choice, while hopeful princes and kings lined up just for a nod of her approval. This is the story of the swayamvar, the ceremony of self-choice that flips our entire understanding of ancient Indian society on its head. The world of arranged marriages. For centuries, arranged marriage has been a cornerstone of the Indian social fabric. It's an institution that has outlasted kingdoms, colonial rule, and the frantic pace of modernity. Even today, a huge number of marriages in India are arranged by families. The process is a familiar one. Families are matched, horoscopes are aligned, and social status is meticulously weighed. It's often less about a bond between two people and more about a strategic alliance between two families, meant to keep social structures and caste lines intact. This system is so dominant that it's easy to believe it was always this way. We read the old stories, see the patriarchal norms, and assume a woman's choice in her marriage was a luxury that just never existed. We accept the idea that a woman's life was mapped out for her, from her father's house to her husband's, under the protection and control of men. But history is never a straight line. It's layered and messy, and hiding in the great epics and earliest traditions of India is a powerful counter-narrative. A time when a woman's voice didn't just matter in her marriage, it was the deciding factor. Other forms of marriage based on mutual consent, known as Gandharva marriages, also existed and were recognized, showing that the history of relationships is far more complex than we remember. What if the system we know today isn't the whole story? What if it's just the chapter that society chose to remember? The revelation, the ceremony of self-choice. This brings us to the swayamvar. The word itself, from Sanskrit, is a giveaway. Swayam meaning self, and vara meaning groom or choice. It was, literally, a ceremony of self-choice. This was a known practice, especially for women of the kshatriya, or the royal and warrior class during the Vedic period when society was more fluid. This wasn't some obscure ritual. It was a legitimate, celebrated path to marriage. In a swayamvar, a woman of marriageable age would choose her husband from a lineup of suitors. Kings would send invitations far and wide, and princes and warriors would travel for a chance to win her hand. The power dynamic was the complete opposite of what we know today. The men were there to prove their worth. The woman held the power of selection, and it wasn't always a simple case of picking the most charming suitor. Some swayamvars gave the bride total freedom to simply garland the man she wanted, like the story of Damayanti, who chose her beloved Nala even when powerful gods were among the suitors. In other cases, the choice was tied to a challenge, a test of skill and bravery known as a virya shulka, or a bride price of valor. In this version, the bride's hand was promised to whoever could pull off a seemingly impossible feat. This ensured she married not just a man of her choosing, but the most heroic and capable man there. It's in these grand contests that we find some of India's most legendary stories, the legendary swayamvars of Sitta and Draupadi. Maybe the most famous swayamvar of all is that of Sitta, the princess of Mithila, from the epic Ramayana. Her father, King Janaka, declared that any man who wanted to marry her first had to lift and string the pinaka, the celestial bow of the god Shiva. This was no normal weapon. It was divinely heavy and powerful, and no mortal had ever managed to wield it. Princes and kings from across the land gathered, each sure of his strength. They came forward one by one, and one by one they failed, unable to even move the bow. The hall was filled with the embarrassment of defeated royals. Then a young prince from Ayodhya, Rama, stepped forward. He lifted the bow with stunning ease, and as he pulled the string, it snapped in two with a crack like thunder. Sita, who had been watching, came forward with a garland of flowers and placed it around Rama's neck, showing her acceptance and her choice. She chose the one man who had proven his divine worth. A similar epic contest is at the heart of the Mahabharata for the swayamvar of Draupadi, the princess of Panchala. Her father, King Drupada, set up an even tougher test of archery. A golden fish was mounted on a spinning wheel high above a pool of water. To win, a suitor had to string a massive bow and, looking only at the fish's reflection in the water, pierce its eye. Again, legions of famed warriors tried and failed. Many couldn't even lift the bow. The challenge seemed impossible. Then Arjuna, one of the Pandava princes, disguised as a commoner, stepped up. With perfect focus, he strung the bow, aimed at the reflection, and his arrow flew true, piercing the eye of the spinning fish. As was her right, Draupadi garlanded the victor, choosing the man whose incredible skill had won her hand. These stories are more than myths. They're cultural landmarks that preserve the memory of a time when a woman's choice in her marriage was celebrated in the grandest way possible. The great shift: why was this tradition forgotten? So, if the swayamvar was so celebrated, what happened to it? Why did a tradition that empowered women fade away, replaced so completely by a system controlled by patriarchs? The answer lies in the gradual societal shifts that happened after the Vedic period, as Indian society became more rigid and hierarchical. These changes were eventually written down in influential legal texts, most famously the Manu Smriti. This text laid out a strict code of conduct that reshaped social rules, especially for women and the caste system. The Manu Smriti pushed for a society where women were placed under the lifelong guardianship of men, first their fathers, then their husbands, and finally their sons. A woman's independence was systematically limited. At the same time, the caste system became much more rigid. Keeping the purity of one's caste became a critical social duty, and the easiest way to control that was to control who married whom. Parental control over marriage became a tool to enforce caste endogamy, the rule that you must marry within your caste. A woman's freedom to choose, the very heart of the swayamvar, was a direct threat to this new order. What if she chose a man from a lower caste? The risk to the social hierarchy was seen as too great. So, traditions like the swayamvar and even love-based Gandharva marriages were slowly discouraged and fell out of favor, especially among the upper castes who had the most to lose. The power of choice was taken from women and put firmly in the hands of their families. The rise of practices like child marriage further cemented this, ensuring a girl was promised to a suitable family long before she could form her own opinion. Marriage slowly transformed into a tool for consolidating family power and preserving caste lines. The history of the swayamvar is a powerful reminder that culture isn't a monolith. It's not static. The traditions we think of as ancient and unshakable were often preceded by radically different ones. The idea that Indian women were always silent participants in their marriages is a narrative that serves one version of history. But it's not the complete picture. For a time, in the age of epics, a woman's choice wasn't just a possibility. It was a spectacle of power and agency. The tales of Sitta, Draupadi, and Damayanti aren't just fairy tales. They are the echoes of a forgotten reality, a cultural memory of a time when a woman held a garland in her hands, and with it, the power to choose her destiny. Understanding this doesn't just change our view of the past. It enriches our understanding of the complex, ever-evolving story of India itself. If you found this piece of forgotten history fascinating, be sure to like and subscribe for more dives into the past, and let us know in the comments, what other lost traditions should we explore next?